Today, we're going to find out how, in a few chaotic minutes, the German Luftwaffe was able to shoot down 5 British Spitfires without losing a single plane themselves. The date is May the 5th, 1942. Europe is living in dark days. Belgium has been under German control for nearly 2 years. The Luftwaffe is in complete control of the skies. Since the Battle of Britain, the Germans have reinforced their ranks and researched new aircraft. They have built new airfields all over their newly conquered territories. Their pilots are very skilled and battle-hardened. The British Royal Air Force is fighting this air war alone at the moment. The United States have only just begun the fight in the Pacific with the Doolittle raid on Japan. It won't be until August that the 8th Air Force will be performing her first bombing missions over Europe. The Luftwaffe had repelled everything the British RAF had thrown at them. Flying over occupied Europe was nearly impossible, even suicidal at times, and yet the Brits just kept on coming. One of the tactics the Royal Air Force was using at this moment, in 42, was the so-called circus mission. A circus was a low-level bombing mission of a relatively small group of bombers, usually light bombers like the Blenheim or Mosquito, that would conduct the bombing raid, while a larger force of fighter aircraft, like Spitfires and Hurricanes, provided escort and covered their withdrawal. The fighters would draw out the enemy and, hopefully, shoot them down, while the bombers could continue to do their jobs unharmed. The circus mission that was planned today was Circus 157 and would target the power plant of Lille in northern France. The bombing force would consist of 6 A-20 Boston light bombers from 226 Squadron. The escorting force were 36 Spitfires, flown by a mix of British, Belgian, Czech, Norwegian, Rhodesian, Canadian, and Dutch pilots. These aircraft came from 64, 122, and 313 squadrons. The Allied pilots we will be focusing on today will be Sergeant Roland Raibout, who was Canadian, Sergeant Stacey Jones, a Brit, Baudouin de Hemtine, a Belgian nobleman who had been fighting the Germans since May 1940 when the Blitzkrieg came over Belgium and had managed to escape to Britain. And lastly, the Czech, Sergeant Karel Pavlik, who had done the same for his country. At 3:30 in the afternoon, the Boston bombers reached Lille, but due to the cloud cover could not drop their bombs. They turned to fly back to the UK, closely accompanied by the 12 Spitfires of 64 Squadron. There, all 16 aircraft managed to land safely. At exactly the same time, above the Kemmelberg, near Dranouter in West Flanders, the 313 and 122 squadrons are attacked by 15 German Focke-Wulfs coming at them from the direction of St. Omer, about 600 meters above and behind their Spitfires. These Germans belonged to Jagdgeschwader 26, who operated out of Wevelgem and St. Omer, a very well-trained group of pilots. Seconds later, 6 more Wolfs came in and shoot the Spitfires from an easterly direction. A fierce, large-scale dogfight ensues between 45 aircraft, with catastrophic consequences for the RAF pilots. As the Focke-Wulfs blazed in for their first head-to-head confrontation, the 22-year-old British pilot Stacey Jones is hit and immediately spirals to the ground. His Spit Mark 5B, serial BM404, crashes in the front garden of a small home near Poperinge. Stacey was only a few days away from getting a well-earned rest. He was going on leave to meet up with his brother, who was serving in the army. A memorial plaque was erected on the location of his crash. The house has been renovated in recent years, but I am happy to have seen it before they did. It hadn't changed a bit until the new owners repainted it. The original owners kept a small piece of silk coming from Stacey's parachute, and I was able to see it on display in the temporary exhibition in Poperinge a few years ago. Only minutes after Sergeant Jones is downed, Sergeant Roland Joffre Raibout, in blue section of the 122 Squadron, is attacked by 2 Focke-Wulfs. 4 witnesses on the ground watch him bail out from his stricken Spitfire at the height of about 600 meters. His parachute stays shut, or perhaps his aircraft flies too low for the parachute to open, and Roland falls to his death. A farmer finds his lifeless body, buried 20 centimeters deep in the soft spring earth of a field near Newkirke. With stretched arms, Roland is bent forward on his knees without any apparent injuries. His Spitfire briefly flies on and crashes into a ditch at Ploegsteert, about 1 kilometer away. Sergeant Reboot is 27 years old and on his 5th mission. His death must have been terrible news to his cousin, Sergeant George Naden, who flew in the Red section of 122 Squadron, alongside Roland on this fateful day. They served together in the squadron since February 1942. František Feitel is a Czech pilot. He's the squadron leader of 122 Squadron and the only one of the 5 shot-down pilots to survive his crash landing. During Operation Circus 157, he damages 2 enemy aircraft before he is forced to land with his damaged aircraft in a field near the village of Hardefort on the outskirts of Kassel in northern France, with the engine of his Spitfire burning and his aircraft riddled by enemy fire. He leaves the crash site within 10 minutes of landing. He is given civilian clothes by a French woman plucking grass nearby for her rabbits, and starts his escape odyssey into France, across the Pyrenees, to Spain, and then back to the UK. He finally lands in Portsmouth, UK, on 20th August 1942 on his 30th birthday. He immediately resumes his duties in the Royal Air Force. At 15:45, a milkman and a farmer witness the crash of 24-year-old Czech pilot Karel Pavlik. His damaged Spitfire, serial BM261, spirals down from a great height in a lethal pirouette and buries itself at the foot of the Kemmel Hill. The wreck is instantly buried. A recovery attempt was made in 1944 when the Canadian Liberators came by, but it was only in 1947 that the aircraft was pulled from the clay. Sergeant Pavlik was still sitting in his seat, his body, uniform, and aircraft very well preserved. The blue clay that makes up most of the ground here in West Flanders is thick and heavy. It also keeps out any oxygen. Pavlik's own serial number was still visible in his flight gloves. He appeared to have been shot through the head and was, almost certainly, already dead on impact. The Belgian pilot who was forced down during Circus 157 was Flight Lieutenant de Hemptien. He was 33 years old and came from a wealthy Belgian noble family. He managed to crash land his badly damaged Spitfire in a field in Dronother. Unharmed at first sight, he tried to get out of his damaged cockpit but was unable to move. He had been badly hit in the back by a German bullet and bled to death. And this is how 5 aircraft and 4 brave lives were lost in a matter of minutes, having been surprised by the Hun in the sun. The war would rage on, and the Royal Air Force would total up to about 400 circus missions, to varying degrees of success. Thankfully, all killed airmen have a nice monument on the location of their demise. A spectacular but mostly unknown dogfight will now live on, forever remembering them. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you next time.